Never ignore those weird habits that you or someone you know have after having lived with a narcissist. These behaviors or mannerisms might seem odd or out of place, but they're survival tools that once served a very real purpose. Living with a narcissist can turn everyday life into a constant guessing game. You never quite know what's coming next, so you start to develop habits to cope. These habits might stick with you long after the relationship ends. Today, we're diving into 10 of the most common and strangest habits that people pick up after experiencing life with a narcissist. Are you ready for number 1? Quickly looking away when noticed. Have you ever found yourself quickly looking away the second someone catches you in their gaze? It might seem strange, but this is a common habit among people who've lived with a narcissist. If you've been in that environment, you probably learned to act like you're perpetually avoiding a spotlight, one that was often glaring and unforgiving. People who've dealt with narcissists tend to feel like they're always being watched, analyzed, or criticized. When you're under that kind of constant scrutiny, even a simple glance can feel like someone's attempting to unravel you. Eye contact becomes less of a connection and more of a vulnerability. It feels like the other person's about to dig right into your soul. Let's talk about number 2, mirroring others' moods. Blending in becomes an art form when you've lived with a narcissist. You start mirroring the moods of everyone around you like you're some kind of emotional chameleon. If they're upbeat, you're smiling. If they're tense, you get serious real quick. And it's not about fitting in for fun. It's a survival tactic. Psychologist Dr. Lindsay Gibson talks about how people raised around narcissists end up with hyper-awareness of others' emotional states because they learn early that one wrong move can set off a whole storm. So, mirroring becomes your shield. This habit can leave you feeling disconnected from who you are because you focus more on matching their mood than expressing your true emotions. Let's move on to number 3, sitting in inconspicuous spots. If narcissists crave the spotlight or front seat, victims always do their best to avoid being the center of attention. This behavior is rooted in years of being overshadowed by the narcissist's need for the spotlight. Over time, staying out of their view became a survival mechanism to avoid criticism, manipulation, or conflict. This tendency may persist even after the narcissist is no longer in your life. It leads you to sit in the back or hold back in conversations. It's not because you don't have something valuable to offer, but because you've conditioned yourself to remain unnoticed. The habit can affect your self-esteem and sense of visibility. However, recognizing it is the first step toward reclaiming your confidence and breaking free from it. Now, let's continue to number 4, taking excessive notes, screenshots, or recording conversations. Gaslighting is one of the most common tools narcissists use to manipulate their victims. It's when they deny their victim's reality and invalidate their emotions. Have you experienced bringing up an issue that someone said or did, but they only responded with, "I never said that," "I never did that," or "it never happened"? So, if you've lived with a narcissist, you might have developed the odd habit of taking excessive notes, screenshots, or even recording conversations. You document everything to have proof in case they twist the story later. As Dr. Shari Steeners points out, narcissists often manipulate the truth, and keeping detailed notes of your conversation can feel like your only defense. Who doesn't need a written record of every time they've been gaslighted? You're like preparing for a courtroom drama at all times. You shouldn't miss number 5. Using headphones even with no sound. Since narcissistic abuse victims have been gaslighted a lot of times, they do their best to avoid talking to their abuser. If you've lived with a narcissist, you've probably mastered the headphones with no sound trick. It's a genius move to avoid any unwanted interactions without actually blasting music. You pop them in, look super busy, and people think twice before bugging you. It's like an invisible "do not disturb" sign, without having to say, "Please leave me alone." People who've experienced narcissistic abuse often use subtle tactics to create boundaries and maintain control over their personal space. Sometimes the sweet sound of silence is all the comfort you need, especially when it keeps nosy people at bay. Are you still up for number 6? Constantly fidgeting. Anxiety disorder is one of the side effects victims get after having lived with a narcissist. Some victims even have it worse because they're experiencing panic attacks once triggered by the abuse. If you've lived with a narcissist, you know what I mean by this unhealthy, anxious emotion. As a result, you tend to find coping mechanisms to control your anxiety. Perhaps you might have picked up the habit of fidgeting, such as tapping your fingers, bouncing your leg, or adjusting your sleeves 100 times. Dr. Ramani Durvasula notes that people who've been around narcissists often carry high levels of anxiety and hypervigilance. So these little movements help release that nervous energy. You're a human stress ball, squeezing out tension one tap at a time. Let's keep it moving to number 7. Hurrying to finish their meal at restaurants. Narcissists are among the most impatient people out there. They're like spoiled little brats who throw tantrums if they don't get what they want instantly. If you've spent enough time with a narcissist, you have surely witnessed their impatient and quick-tempered attitude. One weird habit you might develop is eating too quickly, especially at a restaurant. You feel like you're in a race against the clock. You're practically inhaling your food, convinced you're bothering everyone by just sitting there. Dr. Craig Malkin, a psychologist and expert on narcissistic abuse, explains that people who've dealt with narcissists often develop a self-blame reflex where they feel like they're an inconvenience just for existing. So there you are, gobbling down your meal as if the restaurant is going to kick you out any second. It's not that you don't enjoy a nice meal. It's just that years of being made to feel like a burden or hassle have trained you to finish fast and get out. Here comes number 8. Shrinking in photos. Narcissistic abuse can make your self-esteem hit rock bottom due to the constant belittling, criticism, and bullying. If you've lived with a narcissist, you've probably mastered the art of shrinking in photos. You tend to lean back, tilt sideways, or even hide half behind someone, as if your goal is to occupy as little space as possible. People who've been constantly put down by narcissists start to internalize feelings of unworthiness, which can make them feel like they don't even deserve a spot in the frame. So there you are, perfecting your vanishing act in every group picture like you're auditioning to be a background extra. After years of someone making you feel too much makes it hard to just show up confidently, even in a snapshot. Moving on to number 9. Double locking doors. Psychologist Dr. Ramani Durvasula explains that living with a narcissist can put you in a constant state of hypervigilance. You're always on guard for the next emotional ambush. If you've lived with a narcissist, you might have developed the weird habit of frequently double-locking doors. It's not just about keeping intruders out. It's about creating a barrier that gives you a sense of safety in a world that's felt unpredictable. Locking and double-locking doors is a small way to regain control. It makes you feel protected, even if it's just for a moment. In a way, it's a subconscious attempt to reinforce boundaries that were consistently crossed in your past. Finally, we're down to number 10. Overcleaning the house. One of the strangest things you might start doing after living with a narcissist is overcleaning the house. Narcissists often have this intense, almost obsessive need for everything to look perfect. shiny floors, spotless countertops, all the little details, but they usually don't do much of the actual cleaning. Narcissists love to set impossible standards, often to control those around them. So, you end up feeling like you have to keep everything spotless just to avoid their judgmental stares or critical comments. Now, you're scrubbing the sink daily, arranging throw pillows just so, and dusting places no one even sees. It's like they turned you into their cleaning robot while they just sit back and supervise. And you wonder why you can't stop vacuuming even the clean spots. Blame it on narcissism. To wrap it up, those are the strange little habits that tend to stick with people who've spent time around a narcissist. These habits might seem unusual to others, but they're often survival tactics that help them get through a tough experience. If you or someone you know can relate to these behaviors, remember that these habits don't define you. They're just a part of the journey, something that can change as you heal and grow. Be patient with yourself. Surround yourself with people who truly care, and take things one day at a time. Healing isn't always easy, but every step you take brings you closer to feeling like yourself again. And that, in itself, is worth celebrating.